Okay. Yeah. So my next point here is what's the central question that we're asking? The central question is how to harness the AI. And I'm asking this question not necessarily as an academician. Of course, it's very important in higher education, but I'm asking this question to you all as policymakers as well, because it comes with profound opportunities, but it comes with urgent risks as well that we all need to address. And I'm sure we are seeing those risks in our classrooms every day. It's not necessarily that we are not seeing those risks. So let's go further and kind of talk about it. What we are going to explore today, we are going to talk about how the AI landscape is changing, how the market trend is happening with the AI landscape, what are the core international business theories that we can discuss in this particular concept, what are the key applications of AI in international business, and also in higher education. I'll just touch upon it a little bit. Then global perspectives, what we can do, we the leaders of higher education, academia, the policymakers, how we all can chip in and can do a better job in terms of this, and what are the critical challenges of AI being so pervasive. So let's follow and let's discuss all these things. And again, this is not a monologue. Whenever you have a question, you can definitely ask me, but I definitely defer it to the last so that we can then discuss it a little bit more. Um, key AI applications in international business. The first one is supply chain. Supply chain right now, supply chain optimization requires AI, which is why the automation process right away tells you, if you go to Amazon, right away tells you what are the things that are available, etc., what are not, and so on and so forth. So supply chain optimization has a key thing in terms of the implication of AI. Cross-cultural communication. I mean, think about 30 years back. I'm going to Japan. I'd like to have some Japanese language so that at least I can communicate to some extent. Right now, it doesn't really much matter. Your computer, your cell phone will tell you. You go to Gemini or ChatGPT, it will tell you, etc., what you have to say going to a restaurant. So cross-cultural communication, that barrier is going down, and AI is playing a huge role in that concept as well. Market intelligence, the sentiment analysis, you, I, and everyone, when we go to the AI, when we go to Amazon, when we go to all other online platforms, essentially we give our secrets to them. Okay, what are the things we like, what are the things we dislike, and etc. So the sentiment analysis of consumers is something that AI can do right away. And then the risk mitigation. AI models are very much used. I'm in economics, I'm in financial economics, my friends. And I can tell you that we are using large language models big time to understand the market failures and so on in the stock market. So this is what I captured in this particular slide. I will just mention it here again. Predictive analysis and autonomous systems for supply chain optimization, real-time translation and sentiment analysis for seamless global collaboration, AI-driven sentiment analysis for market intelligence, and finally, basically the predictive modeling, machine learning to understand the risks in the financial market. So this is the huge role that we can see in the landscape of AI with international business. The core international business theories, the first one when I go to the classroom I talk about is the eclectic paradigm, which is the John Dunning proposed this theory. Now, the location in this particular theory is not the location which was advantageous before. The location in this one is who is moving to AI more, which countries are moving to AI more, and which countries are trying to catch up. That's the location advantage. If I look into the Uppsala incremental model, it's basically the psychological distance is gradually going down. That's not the case anymore. It's just going down right away. Then Porter's Diamond, a national competitive advantage as well. It basically says the companies which can implement AI will have a further edge over the others. Similarly, Hofstede need to come up with how AI will change the cultural aspects, the cultural traits. And finally, the cage distance framework, AI shrinks essentially the cultural, geographic, or economic distance. Initially, something like a gravity model in economics, we used to say US and Canada will have a larger trade. That, of course, has gone down tremendously today because of AI. So these are the models that we can implement in understanding the role of AI in international business. Some facts and figures of why we are talking about AI today. Well, the reason is in 2020, the AI was essentially around $100 billion. Look at the number by 2030 that we are expecting. The AI market size would be around more than $800 billion. In fact, if you ask me as a forecaster, I would see it will touch, $1 trillion. So that's why what's an important aspect of why we are looking at it. The second part of it is what are the AIs what are the models that are used by the developers today? In 2024, there has been a survey which kind of says ChatGPT is the model that's been used largely. And then there are other models, of course, which are getting used overall as well. So I'm just moving on further because these are graphs and quite self-explanatory on its own. The thing that I'd like you to see is there is a huge competition. In fact, I don't know if you are following the news. OpenAI, which is the parent company, the mother company of ChatGPT, Sam Altman, who is the CEO, had just flagged a red flag saying that, hey, others are catching up pretty quickly. And we can see it in the data as well. In fact, Copilot has been quite integrated with Microsoft Office tools and have become quite pervasive to all of us. Similarly, with anyone who is using Google, Gemini has launched Gemini 3, which is again becoming very, very, very significantly important. So I'd like you to see something, and this is, I find it fascinating actually. Leading 20 artificial intelligence models in 2025 in terms of its intelligence index, how intelligent these AI models are. And the first one is Grok, which is if you follow X, if you do X, or if you are in on X, and then you will know that Grok is playing a huge role there. So Grok has already become more intelligent in terms of if you go to the computer scientists. So these are some of the numbers which are telling us that yes, it's crucially important to understand the role of AI. The global AI strategy and the global AI leadership. We need a coherent, centralized strategy. I don't think many countries are doing it. In fact, if I go into the numbers, I will see Saudi Arabia has implemented AI very coherently in terms of its governance. So Saudi Arabia is my benchmark, and then Germany, China, Canada, they're all doing a good job. The US relatively doing a good job in terms of its centralized strategy. US's strength is not the centralized strategy, by the way. US's strength would be the research, and I hope that that remains and continues as it did in the last 50 years at least, 50 to 70 years at least, post World War II. US is doing well in terms of its strategy in AI. Emerging leaders would be Australia, Finland, and Singapore. There is a huge regional variation. The important part, what I'd like you to understand here in this, is that, hey, not every other country are trying to catch up. And AI right now, as I told you, gives you the competitive edge. So one has to catch up. Are the governments doing enough to do so? Because otherwise, following from the previous, keynote presentation, there would be a widening deep divide between the haves and the have-nots. The haves who shall have access to all these AI models, etc., and the have-nots will not have access to all these AI models. That will widen the gap. So all the governments, especially from the emerging economies, because that's the theme of our conference, all the governments need to focus primarily of how to, make sure that AI is reaching every stratum of the society. United States dominates in terms of its research in AI. Top research producers, if I look into it, it would be US would be the benchmark. And then, as you can see, China, Singapore, and then European countries are doing their bit as well. Implications for higher education. Well, the implications for higher education, as you can see, we need to have global collaborations, which we are doing right now, the global collaborations. And of course, we need to integrate AI strategically into our institutional architecture. Are we doing that? I don't see that's quite happening in my university. I don't see that's quite happening because there is still a denial mode that, hey, we do not like students to use AI. well, they are going to use AI, my colleagues, so we don't really have a choice in this particular scenario. The concerns with AI are something huge and something that we need to pay attention to. The consumption of electricity that AI models, the large language LLM models, they do, that's just phenomenally something that we need to note. So, environmental impact of AI, the carbon footprint that it creates, again, the ecological system, are we paying enough attention to it? I fear we are not. I'll give you some examples. Training large AI models consumes enormous energy. 355 metric tons of carbon dioxide, it's equivalent to that. So, are we paying attention to that particular scenario? I totally doubt that. NVIDIA's new chips, they actually consume the amount of electricity with which we can have Georgia, which is a US state. The annual electricity consumption of Georgia is equal to NVIDIA's chips consumption of electricity. So you can imagine what kind of ecological impact these things can create. That's number one. Number two is data privacy and security. In fact, we have something called General Data Protection Regulation. That's a global scenario, that's a global body. However, there are like two things that we need to improve and change. One is there is a huge data hunger. Why do I say a huge data hunger? That's because the LLMs, these large language models, they cannot operate without huge data. They need data so that they can use the past data to give us the answers. So there is a huge data hunger, but we need to understand how to minimize data and how to maintain the privacy, how to protect we are the citizens of this, this global architecture, how to protect us from this. There is a big challenge still going on with this. Cross-border data flows, it requires this general data protection regulation, but I fear it's not quite happening. Urgent global governance is required in this context. The second one is it's creative destruction. This is something new and it will really replace a huge chunk of our employment. Are we doing enough? Are we having the skill developments that are required? A country like India, which is a 1.4 billion people, are they doing enough to do so? These are the questions I think the developing economies and their policymakers need to ask. Are they doing enough to do so? Because 5 years down the line, we do not need many of these jobs anymore. Okay. The third one is the algorithms. We love the magical algorithms, but here what's happening is there is lack of diversity, and I see that here in the United States there is a lack of diversity in terms of these algorithm models. And finally, the inequality, it's not equitable, which I already told you, it's not equitable. So we are at risk of deepening the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I'm borrowing a Marx phrase, fully knowing in the 21st century that's not quite important. I'm moving on further. So global supply chain, cross-cultural collaboration, we already talked about it. Market intelligence, we talked about that. It plays a huge role. Ethical AI governance, whether that's happening, well, that the intentional governance of the intent should be there by the governments, and whether that's there or by the private players as well. So these are key questions which I don't see that there is an answer here. There's a big black box, and we need to open the black box to know what's there inside. We really don't know right now. Legal framework needs to be established, which is coherent and which kind of connects every part of the society. Ethical principles need to be established. National authority should be followed very carefully, and cross-border data, we need to understand what's happening with that. Otherwise, the location advantages of the US or China who are investing in the AI, they'll have the data, or Europe in this particular scenario, they'll have the data. They would know each and every bit of all the consumers and what we dislike, what we like, etc. Implications for the educational leaders, which is not our topic today, but I just touch upon it and I'll move on. Curriculum design, integrate AI, please. I'd like to request Dr. Datta for the next one to give me a workshop to talk about this more and more. Research strategy, we need to do global collaborations. Conferences like this are going to be huge and very important for the crossovers. Faculty development, students are using AI pervasively, how to really make them use AI efficiently and effectively, not losing their own critical understanding of the matter. That's an important part, and governance and compliance, as I was telling you, are going to be important as well. So, given that, these are my recommendations that we need to follow, which I have mentioned to some extent already. So, what I'd like to tell you in conclusion is we are at the crossroads. We, the leaders from higher education, we, the leaders in the governments, the policymakers, we all need to come together. And we have a huge role to play in this particular scenario to make AI as the effective and efficient tool, and the use of profound use of AI that can be done in a more in a more positive way rather than the risks that come with it. We have to avoid making it the Frankenstein of our current society. On that note, I'll just end, and if there are any questions, I'll take them. Thank you.